Welcome to the Ignition News. We love to have you here, but remember to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Click that like button, that subscribe button, and leave a comment below. It's going to be a great show. Welcome to the Ignition News. Let's get busy with the truth. We go, and we are live. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It is March 26th, 2026, 32626. And it's so good that you're here. We have a few news stories to talk about today and probably some unforecasted rants. It sounds like my neighbors are using power tools outside. Nothing I can do about that. Let's see what happened today. On March 26th, Dr. Jonas Salk announced the successful testing of a vaccine to prevent polio. And then crazy moms all over the world decided to make weird Facebook conspiracy memes about vaccines. And now here we are because we tolerated that in our society instead of shunning them out of the public discourse. Let's see what else. Oh, 1971, East Pakistan declares its independence from Pakistan to form the new nation of Bangladesh. Not a lot of people know that. Let's see. In 1997, authorities in Rancho Santa Fe, California, discovered the bodies of 39 members of the Heaven's Gate cult. Remember that? Where they were going to go ride on the Hale-Bopp comet? Does anyone remember the Heaven's Gate people? Let's see. In 1872, the fire extinguisher was patented. 1976, Queen Elizabeth II became the first head of state to send an email. In 1976, that sounds wildly inaccurate. That sounds wildly fake news. Let's see. What else? It is Live Long and Prosper Day for my Star Trekkies out there. It's National Spinach Day. It is Purple Day. Diana Ross was born. She's 82 years old. Steven Tyler is 78. Happy birthday, Steven Tyler. And also Martin Short. Leonard Nimoy, for our Star Trek fans once again. And Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman to serve as a justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. 1930, was born today, lived until 2023. Good morning. Why is history like a fruitcake? Because it's full of dates. Okay. Why was World War II so slow? Because they were stalling. I didn't say they'd all be good jokes. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Ignition News. It's good to have you. I wanted to start out the show today by speaking loudly so that you could not hear the power tools coming from outside by my neighbors. But secondarily, I actually wanted to talk about something that happened last night. I was driving in one of the wealthiest parts of Las Vegas. Truly, actually, probably the wealthiest neighborhood of Las Vegas. We're talking $30 million homes, $40 million homes. Multiple security guard gate access. Like, you have to be followed into the community by security and followed out. So anyways, I was there and I was just about to go up to someone's house and I noticed a rattlesnake on the ground. And that's not hard to miss, in a very well landscaped area with concrete and all that sort of stuff. And I noticed this rattlesnake, and it was unmistakably a rattlesnake, right? And it was injured. I'm guessing it had been run over. So, there was something there was some kind of like metaphor about the fact that this snake was there in this extremely wealthy area. And I was just like, I found it deeply, deeply unsettling. There was also this mockingbird, and mockingbirds really fiercely protect their nest. And I think the mockingbird was like not understanding what was happening with the rattlesnake. So the mockingbird was like going at the snake. And a few things, stick with me here, but I really felt unsettled in that metaphor. And I think part of it was I couldn't figure out who was I in this metaphor of this story. You have this snake that is in this multi-billion-dollar complex, right? Well, that's actually his home. The billionaires are actually on his home, right? And we're traditionally afraid of the snake, right? Like, we're supposed to be afraid of rattlesnakes because they're dangerous, they're venomous, they could kill you, right? But here it was like very weak and it was very like fragile in this form. But also what I couldn't get over was like, I was the only person to notice this snake. I was the only person that noticed this very clearly. It was very clearly a rattlesnake. And I was thinking to myself, like, that itself had to be like some kind of indication of like where we are as a society, like these very wealthy people that are sheltered off from actually the real dangers of the world. But then also, like, there's this sort of micro metaphor of like the mockingbird fighting with the rattlesnake, but the rattlesnake is already injured and it can't really hurt the mockingbird. And so it's like this metaphor of like in the middle of all of this, these two things are fighting. The rattlesnake very much at the end of its life, and this mockingbird not really understanding that, but actually like the bigger enemy is obviously the billionaires who live in these areas, because they could easily kill both of those things, and given the opportunity or the slightest inconvenience, the billionaire wouldn't think twice about destroying the mockingbird's nest, and is much more capable of doing so than the rattlesnake. And so yet here they are, and I thought that was like a weird metaphor for where we all are right now, sort of fighting for our own very literal survival, while the actual threat to us is these billionaires, right? Like, and the moment they decide that we are inconvenient, or the moment we mess up their view, or the moment we get in the way of anything of theirs, they don't think twice about harming us. They really don't. I think what's also sad is like, again, like I'm sitting here and I know that I'm supposed to intuitively be afraid of a rattlesnake. Like that's a instinctual thing. And just to be super clear, like if you ever encounter a rattlesnake, you should be very careful in that situation, just to be super clear. And you should contact a professional who's able to do that. But then I like started like really empathizing for this creature that, was dying. And it didn't die a humane death. It died probably in a lot of pain. And I think we tend to like to convince ourselves that animals don't feel don't feel fear. Like we like to convince ourselves that animals don't feel pain and fear when it's convenient for us. Um, but the last sort of metaphor that really stuck with me was the fact that in I think the overarching metaphor was like both myself and the rattlesnake were really unwelcome in that space, right? I was functionally not any different than that rattlesnake. Security had to escort me on the property. They had to follow me on the property, and they had to follow me off of the property. That's essentially what they did when they found out the snake was there. They called security to, quote, deal with the rattlesnake. And yeah, there was something really powerful about that. Aside from the fact that I always see this metaphor of gates in the desert as like a bad thing. I think gates in a desert are a weird sub metaphor itself. But I don't know. Something about that really stuck with me as a metaphor of where we are. So let me see how we can tie that into the show. We lost a lot of people in that metaphor, but I also just want to say that I don't know. I really cherish life. I really do. And I think what I closed the night out with thinking last night was like, at least someone got to appreciate that rattlesnake. It was very beautiful. It was very pretty. Obviously, it was in its own environment. Obviously, it died a really painful way. And I think it's a stark contrast to, I think, how the billionaires probably handled that rattlesnake, which is like, oh, it's a scary inconvenience for a little fluffy fucking $700 haircut Pomeranian. You know what I mean? So anyway, welcome to the show. I know I lost a lot of people there, but good morning. Let's talk about the news. Not everyone gets it. I can't, it's not my responsibility to make sure that everyone that's following the Ignition news is as cool as we are. But anyways, good morning. Let's talk about what's happening. It is, in fact, March 26th. There are a few stories that tie together that I want to talk about. The first one is actually March 28th. We're 2 days away from the next No King's Day protest. What we now know from the folks at 5051 is that it is set to be the single largest day of civil protest in American history. This will now be the third time that the No Kings protest is the largest protest in American history. Obviously, we have the war in Iran, which is causing people to come out. We have gas prices spiking. We have the ICE raids, then ICE at the airports. We have everything that's happened with immigration, what happened in Minnesota, what happened with Renee Good, what happened with Renee Good and Alex Preddy. And now we're seeing people taking to the street. The reason I wanted to bring this up today is that I see a lot of discourse happening where people are sort of discouraging people who are participating or actively criticizing those people who are participating. But I don't think that we can really move past this idea or move past this concept, this idea that this is, in fact, the largest protest in the history of America. And that does, in fact, mean something. It does, in fact, mean something. All right. I apologize. We had to stop the recording for a little bit because my neighbor is simultaneously using power tools, a large moving truck, and a leaf blower all at once. All of those things are happening at once while recording the show. Not their fault, of course, but man, am I agitated. Anyways, let's get back into the conversation. Talking about no kings. Where I struggle here is I actually see both sides of the argument. I actually completely agree, as you probably well know, as you well know, that the way that Americans are forced into protesting our First Amendment zones, the idea of fencing us in protest boxes like it's Guantanamo Bay is absurd, and simply going to the street with signs is not enough. However, what I think people fail to understand is it is these showings of force by the American people, and by force I mean your voice, not violence. It is these showings of force through using our voices on the street that we begin to build the coalitions necessary to take the actions necessary to take this country back. And I don't understand what people think they're accomplishing when they're criticizing these people who are organizing this way. After all, I'm sure that sometime it was your first protest. It was your first event. It was your first time showing up at something. And the mere fact that more people are showing up every single time, that actually means that more people are waking up. And it gives us an opportunity to talk about other things which are different, more effective, more disruptive forms of legal protest. It gives us the opportunity to talk about different, more effective forms of community aid and getting people together. It gives us the opportunity to talk about different and more effective ways to collectively organize our power. And so, yes, I absolutely understand why people say, oh, it's just a pressure release valve. It's not going to do any good. What does that actually accomplish? That kind of pessimism, that kind of like shitting on other people's parade, literally. I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it's what takes us to the next level. So if you feel that way, I want to challenge you, go anyway. If you think that the people holding signs up or their cute little costumes is not effective enough, or it's not enough protest, or it's not enough resistance to what's happening in this country right now, go to the protest and teach them to do something else. Teach them to build mutual aid networks. Teach them to build community aid. Teach them to find ways to protect themselves in their community. Because you can sit and bitch on your couch about the No Kings protest all you want, but the person who's going to their first protest, calm and quiet and organized and put in the little permitted space as it is doing a lot more than the person sitting on their couch bitching. So I would rather take that first person any day. They care about democracy more than the person sitting on their couch or making a TikTok video complaining and criticizing. But yes, welcome to the Ignition News. Let's get on with it. Something I thought was really interesting. The United Nations General Assembly yesterday, 123 nations voted to formally recognize the transatlantic slave trade as what they called the gravest crime against humanity. This resolution was brought forward by Ghana on behalf of the African bloc, and the vote was 123 in favor, 52 abstentions, and 3 votes against. The people that voted against that were Argentina, Israel, and the United States. The official position of the United States government, and the reason that they voted against this, is because, as they said, President Trump has done more for Black Americans than any other president in history. That was the official reason they refused to acknowledge that UN resolution. 123 civilized nations said yes. The United States, Argentina, and Israel said no. Fascinating. Welcome to the Ignition News, everybody. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for listening to my opening rant about rattlesnakes and mockingbirds, and for listening to these quick updates on what is important. I do want to ask you to please follow the show on your favorite podcast platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Substack, all that sort of thing. The last story I want to talk about today, kind of inconsistency with everything we've talked about, is what's happening at the Pentagon and this sort of censorship of information. It's why I'm asking you to please follow us on other platforms other than, for example, TikTok. Last Friday, a U.S. judge Judge Paul Friedman handed the Pentagon a big legal defeat. He ruled against the Pentagon's new rules about the requirements for reporters to be in the Pentagon. He said, you have to take those back and you have to allow these people back into the Pentagon. Every major mainstream outlet, so that's CBS, CNN, NBC, Fox News, the Ignition News, maybe? No, not really. Okay. Refused to sign the initial pledge going by the new Pentagon's rules. And so they had to basically walk out of the Pentagon. So the judge was quite clear about this. The policy made routine journalism a potential security violation. He said it allowed officials to revoke credentials based on viewpoint, and it used vague terms like security risk and unprofessional contact that gave the government unchecked power over who could report on the Pentagon. And we are seeing this in real time now. We're seeing what's happening as it is harder and harder to see what is going on with what's happening in Iran. On top of that, you have really unchecked, unregulated use of AI. And I think most people now, when you see something happening, whether that's in Israel or Iran or even in America right now, I mean, look at what happened with Alex Preddy. There was this video of him that came out where he was kicking the taillight. And so many people believed then and still believe now that it is AI. We are dependent on having reliable, accurate information. We are dependent on have credentialed journalists in the Pentagon to help sort through some of this madness. And the reason for that is if the Pentagon is allowed to go unchecked without accurate investigative journalism, then bad things are going to happen. We're not going to know about some of the worst crimes being committed in our name with our money. And how do we know this? We know this by looking at what happened in Gaza. The only reporters that were allowed to go into Gaza now have to go with the IDF. You cannot go into Gaza without the IDF. If you do, you certainly risk being attacked by a missile, being killed, being shot, all of those things. Even with that, the state of Israel has killed hundreds of reporters. Missile strikes, mistaken fire, journalists. And then, like Kristi Noem with Renee Good, they call them terrorists. And so as much horrible information as you have seen from Gaza, as terrible as those images are, it's likely we haven't even seen anything close to what actually happens on the ground. And we still are not seeing that. A lot of that is because now our attention is, of course, diverted elsewhere with Iran. But now, here in America, if our own journalists can't even go and report on what's actually happening, and think about this now. What reporters have you seen reporting from a battleship or reporters reporting from the ground in, for example, the United Arab Emirates? Or what CNN reporters have you seen reporting from Saudi Arabia? If you're old like me, you would probably remember that in previous military conducts, organizations like CNN or the Washington Post would have journalists in the military field, in stage with the military, reporting on what's happening. Now, of course, we all know that a lot of that is propaganda. But at least with the propaganda, you're able to sort out, filter out, and start to put things together. And so a judge is able to now say, yes, you broke the rules. You have to change the rules. You have to let these reporters in. But the damage has actually been done. And the Pentagon responded to losing in court by essentially reissuing the same restrictions in a new format, a new package, closing off the press workspace, requiring journalists to be escorted at all times. Now, does that sound familiar? Do you see how it connects? A lot of America's military strategy, a lot of American policing right now is legitimately modeled after the IDF. They train our police, and now journalists in the Pentagon have to be escorted at all times. Like journalists in Gaza have to be escorted at all times. There was a story of a reporter reporting on the conflict in Iran that was struck by a missile, purportedly by Israel. There are fewer and fewer people who are brave enough to go into conflict zones like this, knowing that it's hard to call it an accident. When these hundreds of journalists have been killed, how can you call that an accident? Now, The Intercept tells us that they are actively looking for journalists who break their new rules by taking their credentials away and potentially charging them with crimes. There are not many steps between charging journalists with crimes and shooting them with drones or missiles. There are not many steps. And what happens is our media starts to look more like Iraq. Do you remember Baghdad Bob? Do you remember that guy? I talked about him before. Remember Baghdad Bob, the first war in Iraq? He was like the government's press guy. He would get on every night and he would tell these lies about the government. And here in America, we would watch this guy, Baghdad Bob, and he would get up and he would say, the Iraqi government is defeating the imperialist Americans, and we are beating them back at bay. And we would look at that and we would be like, this is fucking crazy. We can see our military in conflict, in zone, whopping the shit out of you. What are you talking about? Baghdad Bob would get up every night. The president, Saddam Hussein, is unafraid. What's different between Baghdad Bob and Pete Hegseth? What is the legitimate difference? You got Pete Hegseth out there saying that we're winning the war. He's actively, apparently, committing what some people are calling our war crimes. They're talking about nuclear weapons like it's a video game. They are releasing footage of the war that is interlaced with actual video games. How is Pete Hegseth any different than Baghdad Bob? Do you think that other countries now don't look at Pete Hegseth the way that we looked at Baghdad Bob? With this sort of credulity of, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening in real time. We can see what is happening. Today, France itself, France said 30% of the infrastructure has been damaged. It's a critical fuel crisis. No, everything's fine. Everything's great. We're kicking ass. We're taking names. We're punching out. We're going. We're doing it great. Joke. Do you know I saw, this is only a rumor, so I want to report this as a rumor. Do you know I saw that one of the sort of allegations, you probably saw that there was this fire on the Gerald Ford. One of the things I heard was that Pete Hegseth is now mandating again that they have starch on these battleships for ironing, for bed sheets, and for their clothing. Well, these newer warships, they were not built for that kind of thing. They were not built. Their ventilation systems were apparently not built for this. So you got a bunch of starch going around in this big metal boat flying around. And what I heard, and again, this is not substantiated, but I had heard that potentially one of the theories about the fire on the ship was, could it have been the ventilation system sucking in the starch and so you got a fire? Do you know what? We're never going to find out. Why? Because they're making it a crime to report information like that. Did anyone else hear this, by the way? Did anyone hear this? No, I'm the only one. Just my random conspiracy. My random conspiracy about starch. Someone look into that for us. So how do you tie all these things together? Well, we're fighting an unauthorized war that has killed children. Our gas prices are going up. The cost of everything is going to go up. When people in the press or when members of the public ask questions, we are literally gaslit. We are lied to. They lie to our faces. The president of the United States said that Iran had a Tomahawk missile and struck its own girls' school on its own military base. The United Nations just said slavery is a war crime. Or I'm sorry, slavery was a crime, not a war. I mean, I could see how you could say both. The United Nations just overwhelmingly said slavery is one of the worst crimes against humanity that has ever happened. And the United States said, pass. And more Americans are showing up on the street. Saturday will be the largest protest in the history of this country. I know it's not everything you want it to be. I know it's not as direct as you want it to be. I know that probably nothing is going to happen in terms of direct response from your governor. I can acknowledge that it is extremely unlikely that your congressman or your senator or even your mayor or your governor are going to do shit about you showing up for the No Kings protest. But if you thought that was the purpose, I'm sorry, but you're the fool after all. You're the fool. The people who shit on this, they are not the people who organize. They are not the people who build community. They are not the people who build mutual aid networks. The people that shit on this are the people that just sit on their couch and bitch and whine. Yes, okay, we all can acknowledge it's not enough. We all know that. We've been living through all of this. But your job is to go to things like this and to build the community, to build it, to grab onto each other, to find and create that sense of structure. And of course, my lawyer, I have to remind you, at the Ignition News, we do not endorse any kind of political violence or violence of any kind. But poverty is violence. War crimes are violence. Lying about what's happening in your country with your tax dollars, that is information violence. The government is able to inflict unlimited violence on you, and there is no consequence for them doing that. The only consequence you can inflict when they knock you down is to get back up. And yes, It might not be exactly the form of protest that you want. And yes, it may not be as immediate as you want. But how else are you going to find and build the networks necessary to form a revolution? You cannot form a revolution from your fucking couch. Revolutions happen when people get together and form allegiances, mutual aid networks, and community. If we were failing in pushing back against fascism, there would be no third No King's Day protest. There would be soldiers on the street preventing it from happening. And he tried to do that. Do you fucking forget this? Have you lost your fucking short-term memory? Not you, of course, you're smart. He tried to send military to Los Angeles to stop protests. That is what happened. He failed because people refused to back down. If they were being successful, there would be no more protest. If they were being successful, you would be in jail for trying to organize a protest. You would be in jail for putting a sign up, for wearing a costume. You would be in jail now. Power is a numerical function. Strength in numbers is a formula of power. And the people who shamelessly try to chip away at the amassing of power, they don't want power to begin with. Their power is attention. And it will always be attention. The commodity of their power will be the attention they so desperately seek. Form the community aid, the mutual aid, the partnership that you need to form, whether that's at a No Kings protest or at a local like shelter or the words are escaping me right now, or like an event center or a library. Resistance is a weed. No King's Day is a patch of weeds. It's a patch of thousands, millions of weeds. But there are also little tiny patches that shoot off, that grow in little corners, that go into the wind and fly off across the planet. And the people trying to step on us, the people trying to step on the weeds, they don't know that that doesn't do anything. We just grow back stronger, more and more and more and more. If they were successful in what they were trying to do, they would have done it already. But they haven't. And the reason they haven't done it is because of you. That is the truth, as long as we can report it. This has been a fun show, everybody. It's March 26th. If you choose to participate in the No Kings protest this weekend, I hope you have a lot of fun. I hope you meet a lot of people. And I hope you remind yourself what actual American patriotism is, what actually it means to be a great American citizen. Making this place better for your friends, your neighbors, making this place better and stronger for your community, fixing the potholes in the street, making things like access to education, healthcare, better schools, better roads, better parks, better postal system. All of these things are possible. But it is only possible with the mathematical formula of you plus me plus them plus we. Plus, 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 plus. Revolutions are additive. Criticism is subtractive. Be a plus sign. Don't be negative. Oh! Have a good day. That's the show. This has been today's episode of The Ignition News. Please consider following us on all of your favorite podcast platforms, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, or Substack. We're here to deliver to you unfiltered, uncensored news. Let's get busy with the truth on The Ignition News.